Welcome to the Shir for this Motzei Shabbos. Parshas Toldus. Lots of interesting things which we're going to share today. And start off with a question which someone asked about the schedule of Tehillim as it's divided according to the month. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, we know, encouraged this as part of Chitas. But the actual distribution of the Tehillim into 30 sections has its source in Rishonim. The earliest, the one who did it, is someone called Reb Menachem ben Zorach, a Talmud of the son of the Rosh. So that's put it about 600 years ago. This is a copy of the Sefer, which was printed in a town called Sabioneta in Italy in the year Shin Chof Zayin. So that's 1667, something like that. Whatever, it's over 400 years ago. And you see how he writes here, Ve'elahem ha'chalokim she'chilakti ha'tehillim lilmoid b'chol yoim mimei kol chodesh v'chodesh. So he's taking credit that he divided the Tehillim to be recited on a monthly cycle, and on the 24th he says ad ashtre trimei dorech, and on the 25th till mo'ahavti sorosecha. So the question which the person asked was that the Yukuf test, as we know, is divided. It's 22 letters of the Aleph base, and each one has got 8 psukim. So half of 22 is 11. So it would make sense that the Tehillim should start off at the position 12, and that's letter Lamed. So now this is his question: why does the Tehillim start with Mo'ahavti Sorosecha rather than, which is letter Mem? Why does it not let us start with the letter Lamed, which is the 12th letter? So there we have the Tehillim. Where it starts out with Mo'ahavti, and this is the question. So on the left of the sheet, of this screen, we have here a copy from the Sefer Yashmiya Kol Tehilosai. This is a Sefer written by by the name of Reb Shmuel Heber, and he raises this question, and he says in the division of the Tehillim according to the days is divided in, and it starts with Mo'ahavti. It should have started from Lamed. V'nira loima, that the emphasis of chapter Kuf Yutes in Tehillim is about Torah. If you notice, every posuk says Pikudecho, Edisecho, Mishpotecho, Toirosecho. Almost every posuk in Tehillim has got one of those, or Mitzvah, it's got one of those references to Torah. And therefore, he wants us to, the choice was to emphasize the beginning of the second half should be with Mo'ahav Toirosecho. Okay. So that's his suggestion. I'd like to add another possibility that is a very well-known
largest airport in the world, O'Hare Field in Chicago.
That the Eibush Hashem's signature is the word emes, and this I've traced. You have here on the side of the right side of the screen. This is from Yerushalmi, the beginning of Sanhedrin. What's the signature of Kadosh Baruch Hu? Rebbeivoi b'shem Reb Reuven says emes. Mahu emes, shehu alikim chayim u'melech olam, Hashem is eternal. Says Rish Lakish, emes is Aleph Reisha, the Aleph of the base. Aleph is the first letter of the Aleph base. Mem is the middle of the Aleph base, and Tov is Beshoif is the end of the Aleph base. And this is relating to the concept of Ani Rishon, that the Eibishter is not on the receiving end from anyone. So he's the first primary existence, and there's nothing besides him. I'm not going to give it over to anyone else. Okay, so the Aleph of the Tov we understand, and the Mem is the Eibishter is there, is continually present. So that's the Mem. But he says here in Yerushalmi that the Mem is the middle letter. Now you can just go back to the question: why is the Mem the middle letter? If it's 22 letters, so the Mem is not the middle letter. Actually, it's the Lamed and the Chof and the Lamed. So let's come back to our slide again. So there we are. That so the answer to this is that if you include in the Aleph base, not just the 22 letters, but also the final characters, as in the final Chof and the final Mem. So instead of having 22 characters in the Aleph base, you have 27 characters. The middle of 27 is 14. So let's take a look at this. The Yud is obviously the 10th letter. The Chof is the 11th. The long Chof is the 12th. The Lamed is the 13th. And the Mem is the middle, is the 14th. And hence the Mem does become the middle letter of the Aleph base. So this is where you see it's your Yerushalmi says that the Mem is the middle letter. I just want to share with you, since this has come up, about the 5 extra letters. We have this famous Gemara in Megillah Daf Beis Amud Beis, talks about the final letters, and they are known as Mansepach. And Mansepach, the whole discussion that they were introduced by the Nevi'im, and the Gemara says, how could it be? It looks like they went through a phase that they were forgotten and they were reintroduced. Without going into the mechanics of that, but we do have this group, they're known as the Mansepach. These 5 final letters are known as the abbreviation of Mansepach. Just you have here, we say every Shabbos in Musaf, we have the Tikanto Shabbos. Now, Tikanto Shabbos, now look at, if you didn't notice it before, it's the Aleph base back to front. Tikanto Shabbos, Rosiskom, and it says Tov Shin Rev Shkuf. It's going the whole Aleph base back to front until the word Oz. So from Tov through Aleph, it's every letter of the Aleph base. Then it has the 5 letters, 5 double letters, Oz Misina Nitzavot Sivui Pola Koroi. Let's say in Nusach Ashkenaz, here it doesn't have the 5 letters, but this is in Nusach Sfard that you have the Nusach Harizal, that you have the 5 letters of the double letters. Of course, you may ask the question, why are they put in the sequence of Mansepach? Why not in the sequence as they are according to the Aleph base, which is Cham Napatz rather than Mansepach? Good question. So in the Gemara, now, if you notice, the Gemara says Mansepach Tsoifim Omrim, but it's said by the Tsoifim. Tsoifim means the gazers. Of course, it means the Nevi'im. The Navi is sometimes called the Choyze, Anoichi Horoye. You've got various names for the Nevi'im. Here, the word, the name for the Nevi'im was the Tsoife. So some Meforshim say Mansepach has got in it Min Tsoifecha. Its source is from the Nevi'im. So that's one pshat which we have. But then I saw in another sefer, I haven't noted if someone wants to know the source, but here a fascinating thing. We all know this phrase as you have the bottom of the page here, Hashem Melech, Hashem Molech, Hashem Yimlech. We discussed it not long ago. Melech is 40, 30, and 20, which means 90, yes? So Melech is 90, Molech is 90. Yimloich is 100. Take a look at the word Mansepach. Mem Nun is 90. Tzadik is 90. Peichov is 100. So the Mansepach was put in Dafka in this sequence, not Chamnapatz, in order to have the remes to Melech, Molech, and Yimloich. As I saw in Sforim, and perhaps we'll come back to the fascinating insights in Dikduk, but I just wanted to share with you just this point over here. And so that's why I'm suggesting that the reason why the Tilim is divided in the way that it starts with Moahavti is to be merames to the Mem being the middle letter of the Aleph base. I know that in obviously in Kuf Yotes you don't have 27 sets of psukim, you have 22. But there's a remes to this Mem being the middle letter, as in the word emes. Let's take a look at the chats. Read Melech is from the Rollerblades, so it could be. I have it written down. I don't remember. Okay, let's move on. Okay, a more serious, more worrying issue is about what are the parameters for correcting a Bal Koire. So let's first read the Sikha, and then we'll read the Shulchan Aruch. Why? Because that's how the question arose. The Rabbeim, it says here, and this is from the Sefer Hasichos of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he says that Rabbeim were very, very pedantic about Kriyas HaTorah, that they should be keeping the notes, the Tamei Hanagino, the notes. The word in Yiddish for a note is trop. And very often it would be that the Bal Kriya, the reader, made a mistake in one of the notes, and he was called to repeat the word. Sometimes he had to repeat a half a pasuk or a whole pasuk if it wasn't a pasuk which has Hashem's name in the pasuk. So it looks like this. When there was a mistake and it had to be corrected, so immediately there was thinking, is there a Hashem's name in the pasuk? Then just repeat the word. If there's no name of Hashem in the pasuk, or not thus far, then perhaps probably got to do with the context. Sometimes repeating a word, it looks out of context, and therefore you have to go through the whole sentence again. At any rate, so sometimes they would tell them to go back to the beginning of the pasuk, and the mistake in Kriyas in the trop was as if he had made a mistake in a pronunciation which changes the meaning of the word in the Torah. So here we have a significant point here, that there's something which is, how do you say, the baseline is a mistake which changes the meaning of the Torah. And then we've got lesser mistakes. And with the Rabbeim went so extreme that even if it was what we would think a minor mistake, they would correct it. Okay, now let's look at the Shulchan Aruch. So this is, as you see, it's in Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim Simchuf Mem Beis, and the Mechaber, that's the block letters, Reb Safkara writes, Koravato, if the reader made a mistake, Afilu bedikduk ois achas, even if it was the precision of even one letter, so he has to repeat. V'chein din hachas, then there are more ads. Now the Ramor, sometimes he comes across clearly as v'yesh oimrim, and sometimes he comes across as if he's making a clarification. But it could also be this clarification he's disagreeing. V'chein din hachas na koire, whether it's the person who has the aliyah, as in Sephardic communities it's still done, that the one who has the aliyah himself reads. And in the Ashkenazi communities, it's more common that they have an appointed Bal Koder, and he does the reading. And the same thing would be that if he makes a mistake, you should correct him. However, he says, it's only if it's a change which changes the meaning. Omar, Oimer, Yoshev, Yoshav. These are, Yoshev means he is sitting. Yoshav, he sat. So these are change the meaning. But if he made a mistake with a tune, oy benikud, or with a vowel, ein machzir in oysre. So let's say he said oretz, eretz, eis, es. So those things do not change the meaning. Then ein machzir in oysre. Then we don't make him repeat because of such a mistake. Aval goyarim boy, he should be reprimanded. All right, so here we have the Mechaber, the Shulchan Aruch has taken, according to me, he read it ace instead of es instead of ace. That's enough of a reason to tell him to go back, to correct it. The Ramah takes a more lenient stance, and he says if it does not change the pshat, then he doesn't have to repeat it. If he misses out a trop, the wrong trop, or if he mispronounced in a way that it does not change the pshat, then he does not have to repeat it, but one should reprimand. So now here comes the question: what is so the Rabbeim were obviously lifnim mishura sadin. What should be the standard practice? Very difficult. Now the background, if you take a look in the Shulchan Aruch and the Bes Yosef, the background I think is the Maroi. Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin, where he says that he's from a Sadeshan, where he says that they didn't want to embarrass the Bal Koder. And I definitely, if you want to discourage a fellow from being a Bal Koder, keep on correcting him. Hakarain every 2 minutes, another correction, and then next week you'll be looking for another Bal Koder. It's not a clever thing to do. It's an embarrassing. But then I think one could say Hakoy lefi ha'mevayesh v'hamizbayesh. And I think there's a very big difference in a regular setting and a chassid by the Rebbe. There is a certain already an aim of the chassid, a bitul of the chassid to the Rebbe. And so in that setting, I think it's more acceptable that he will be corrected to get it right. I was thinking also on a if that the word the writer was emotional level, but in Buckingham Palace, protocol has to be exact. It's like you can't have little mistakes. But the idea by a Rebbe, to get the trop right, everything has to be correct. A Rebbe shouldn't have anything b'di'evet. Well, people like us, we do b'di'evet some other things also, but the Rebbe is everything is lechatchila, should be on the level of lechatchila. This is on a hergish level. I think it also has to do with a deeper appreciation of the trop. And here just a quote. This is from the Kaf HaChaim. And the Kaf HaChaim, actually, he identifies that the Sephardic psak is more rigid than the Ramah. Although, as I said, the Ramah can be read as just clarification. The Sephardim take a view that actually you do have to correct if there was a mistaken dikduk. So he has here from Kaf HaChaim brings from the Kisva Arizal, that the Sefer Torah has got no nukudas, got no vowels in it, no notes in it. So it's like the Melochim, it's like kings, but they are like dead, because they are just mute. When the person reads them, so he's bringing a chayis into them. And the time of the nukudas, they bring a chayis. They are, like I said, bringing them the Melochim to life by bringing with the right tamim. So I think by appreciating, which it says, I mentioned last week, I think, which it says in Kabbalah, that timim nekudas tagin oisius tanto tof nun tes nun tof aleph tanto is Moshe Sinai, that the timing the trop on Moshe Sinai. So therefore they are important components, and therefore one should be careful not to miss out on them. But again, I don't think this union of correcting because the Rabbein corrected on every little note. Therefore, it means that Chassidim have to do the same. You have to be. And it says the Loshen Goyarin. Goyarin. So first by Krishma Shalamito, you should be Goyarin on your own yet Nefesh Abamis, and you should say Ata Nuvel Manuvel Mesukot Mesur. Once you finish Goyarin on your own Nefesh Abamis, then you can do the Goyarin on other people also. The kids. Let's move on. So that's just one more interesting thing. There has been the question raised: is dikduk Torah? I heard from Ramor Chasafin Alav Shalom that someone asked the Rebbe, why does the Chassidic Chadorim not learn dikduk? So the Rebbe says, actually, it's dikduk. It's milra, not mil-el. But is dikduk, the rules of dikduk, are they Torah? Or is it just language? Is it just grammar? And I just this week in the Hiskashrus, the weekly booklet of Hiskashrus, I had a fascinating insight, a fascinating article about the 5 parts of the pronunciation, Hey Mutsois Hapeh. And you have in Zohar talks about it, and in Kisvi Arizal, and it's got to do with Hey Gvurus, and it's got to do with Spheres and Tzutzach. The Hey Mutsois Hapeh. And there's a whole Torah in Kabbalah about this. And therefore, you have they seem to be just rules of grammar, but they're grammar of Lashon HaKodesh, and therefore, certainly on Al Derech HaSoid, there's definitely, they are in Yonim Amukim in Torah, without question. Okay. Unrelated to this, another Ingerman sent me a copy of the Tilas Hashem Siddur, and the lower one on the page has got the word Hoysa twice, actually 4 times, but in the Pasuk Evan Moasa Aboinim, Hoysa has got the asterisk, and in the Pasuk Emes Hashem Hoysa Zois, it doesn't have the asterisk. So it's asking one why is there a difference between this word and that word? And then who put in these asterisks? So I want to give you some history. He was fascinated with my answer, and therefore I want to share with you also. The Alter Rebbe, who published his Siddur in Tovkov Samach Gimel, which is now about 217 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever, 217 years ago. The Alter Rebbe did not put in symbols to identify what is a shvono or shvonach. Shvono is the audible shvo, the moving shvo, and shvonach is the resting shvo, the silent shvo. The Alter Rebbe did not differentiate when he published his Siddur. In the year Tofresh Ein Aleph, which is about 110 years ago, the Siddur was printed in Vilna. And the Vilna was certainly the best quality printers in the whole of Russia and Poland, etc. Vilna was the top quality place. And there was a company which produced a very nice Siddur. See, they published other Siddurim, Ashkenaz also, but they also published a Siddur Harizal. And it was called Seder HaAvodah. And it's very, very, the diktuk is on a very good standard. And when the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, comes to America in 1940, our Rebbe comes to America in 1941 in summer. And one of the things that started off then was the Merkaz L'Inyonim Chinuch, and setting up schools. And this grew, and they were teaching, a part of the schedule, curriculum in schools is also to daven. But there was no Chabad Siddur, which was user-friendly for a school. The Torah Or Siddur, besides being big, also you have to keep on flipping pages, which is not good if you're trying to control a class. And then there was the very thin Rastova Siddur, which is, again, very small and not easy to use either. So there was a plan. They had to find a decent, user-friendly Siddur. So they took the Seder HaAvodah Siddur, and they made photocopies of it. And they of course, there's a lot of cutting and pasting, but overall, the Siddur Tilas Hashem Hasholem, which we are familiar with, which we're brought up with, that is a photocopy of the Seder HaAvodah, and the asterisks were added in that edition. So the asterisks denoting when it's a shvono were added in this Vilna print 110 odd years ago. And that kept on being reprinted, and it came a certain, you can't keep on reprinting the same text because it gets a bit fuzzy. It comes a point where you need to retypeset the stuff. And about 20 odd years ago, in Kfar Chabad, there's a Kahos in New York, and there's a Kahos in Kfar Chabad, and Kahos in Kfar Chabad undertook to retypeset the whole Siddur. Here now, then, here's another important point, though, that the rules of diktuk are not written in Shulchan Aruch, and they're not totally, there's not a total consensus either in some of the things. The printer in Vilna was following the policies of a medaktek who lived in the times of Baal Shem Tov by the name of Reb Zalman Henna. Reb Zalman Henna. Zalman Henna developed certain chidushim in dikduk, and he had the good fortune of running into at loggerheads with none other than Rabbi Yaakov Emden. Rabbi Yaakov Emden was known for his strident approach to his opponents, and he had issues with other people. That also Rabbi Yaakov Emden was a printer, so he would publish his own stuff. So the Rabbi Yaakov Emden has a whole sefer called Luach Eretz, where he is challenging the chidushim of Reb Zalman Henna. Be that as it may, Reb Zalman Henna still remains a very respected authority in dikduk. The Pri Megadim talks about him in glowing terms. Fine. One of the areas of the chidushim of Reb Zalman Henna is in the Shiva. But most other medaktikim don't accept the approach of Reb Zalman Hen. So, and just to add to this, the Rebbe encouraged Reb Mottel Schusterman, who was the Bal Koire in 770. The Rebbe encouraged him to teach Dikduk to the Talmidim in 770, which he did, and he put together a manual for following the general approach of Dikduk, and he teaches also the rules of Shvona. It so happens to be that Reb Mottel Schusterman is the father-in-law of Reb Menachem Wolf, who is the director of Kahos in New York, in Eretz Yisrael, in Kfar Chabad. So when Rebbe Wolf was reprinting the Siddur, retyping, typesetting, so he followed the policies, not of Reb Zalman Henner, but they follow the policies, the more popular policies, as taught by his father-in-law, by Reb Mottel Schusterman. So therefore, if you start comparing the asterisks in the Kfar Chabad print and the American print, you'll see many, many differences. I was teaching Dikduk in class, and I took a page out of Shir Shalyoim, and I had taught them from Rabbi Schusterman's book, and I'd taken a page out of Tilas Hashem, and there were so many differences. So this is the background. That still does not explain why you should have Hoyso once with asterisk on it. That doesn't make sense. I'm just saying it was all typeset anew, and that's why sometimes things crept in, mistakes. But this is the history of the asterisks. I also want to show you one example here. Al kanfi v'gdeichem. So one of the rules of Shvono is if you have two Shvoin consecutively, the second one will be a Shvono. So like in the word Tishmeru, so it's Sheme, but the Tish is a silent Shvo, and the second one of the Mem is audible, Tishmeru. So when you have two Shvoin consecutive, is the second one is audible. That's a general rule. Reb Zalman Henner came up with that's everyone agrees. Reb Zalman Henner made a chiddush. The word kanfei, for example, well, the plural of konof is konofayim. So perhaps it should have been kunafei. But you can't have two shvoim consecutive. Therefore, it's expanded to kanafei. But you should treat it as if it's two consecutive shvoim. Same thing, melech. So it's melochim. So if you have the kings of, it should be meleche. But you can't read it that way, so it becomes malache. But then under the lamed of malache should be a shvono. That was one of his chidushim. And as they say, most other medakdikim don't follow that. So this is where you'll see a difference. You know, whichever way you say it's okay. The Eberster hurt in any case. But this is just the history of how it developed. So the Tilas Hashem Siddur, someone Baruch Noah writes to the Rebbe. There's lots of mistakes in the Tilas Hashem with the Shvoin. The Rebbe says when we worked on it, there were bigger problems. Imagine how a whole Siddur with 250 pages to start tempering, adjusting every single Shvo. At the time, they had a pressure and they prepared a Siddur the way it was, and the major inyonim they sorted out, and the Shvoin they didn't deal with. Okay, let's take. Appears to approach one more slightly different. Yes, so there we are. So this is the history of the Shvoin, and let's move on. Someone asked me this past week about making a brocha boire mine v'shomim. First asked about cinnamon and then about pepper. So the brocha on B'Somim is not only on Motzei Shabbos. It's a halacha throughout the week. Whenever you pick up something to enjoy its fragrance, you make a brocha. So here we have in the Perik Yud Aleph, or say the Birchas Hanehenin, it says pilpulin v'zangevil ksushin, crushed pepper and crushed ginger. Even though you enjoy the fragrance, some say you shouldn't make a brocha by whatever the brocha should be, or nation rechteh v'aperos, whatever. The fish mikivan shasuyin letavlin bilvad. They are there as a seasoning. You put pepper into a food to make it tasty, not because you make it to get a good smell. And therefore, it's not designated for smell. It's not there to add a fragrance, and therefore they are, of course, they do have a smell, but then that's not the purpose which they are used for in cooking, and therefore one would not make a bracha on them, etc. By contrast, he says, kinomoin v'tzipayren, cinnamon and cloves. First of all, it's common to smell them, to enjoy the fragrance, even not during eating. And also when they are put into a tavshil, into a food, they are also put there with the intent to enhance the fragrance, the smell of the food, to give it a wafting. Did I pronounce it right? I'm not sure. So therefore, so this is the halacha. Cinnamon, you could say a ber min of samim, whereas pepper, one would not say ber min of samim. Let's move on. Now, apparently, in Eretz Yisrael, there's a possibly got to do with COP26, I don't know, but there's now a big push to reduce the amount of disposables being used. And the government wants to raise a exorbitant tax on disposable paper dishes, plastic dishes. And the alternative is obviously, if you have a larger operation, is to you have a dishwasher. So this is perhaps the background. I got a shaila, someone, a shliach from somewhere in the middle of Europe, sent me, and I didn't realize the news around this. He asked if you have stuff which was in a dishwasher before Shabbos, and then the dishwasher was in operation as Shabbos came in, and then it's now 2 hours into Shabbos, the dishwasher switches off. Are you allowed to open the dishwasher to take stuff out? So I'm reading here from a Sefer Orches Shabbos, which is a relatively recent Sefer. It's become very popular, very nice Sefer, contemporary. It says, if you have put in, before Shabbos, you put in wet laundry into a dryer, or you put dishes into a dishwasher, and the function did not stop until the onset of Shabbos. And there's a question whether you can open the door once it's finished. And the question here is, we know the rules of Muksa. Anything which was out of bounds at the onset of Shabbos, it remains Muksa for the whole of Shabbos. So during Bein HaShmoshes, you weren't able to open the door of the dishwasher or because that would involve switching off the power. By opening it, switches off the power. So then that makes that door Muksa. The fact that later the power stopped running through and now you could open it without switching anything off, but because it was out of bounds during Bein HaShmoshes, for the duration of Bein HaShmoshes, it should remain Muksa for the whole of Shabbos. Now, not so poshet, because sometimes Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he says that if washing was on the line at the beginning of Shabbos and it dried on Shabbos, he says it's not Muksa, because there's a lotion of Gomre Bidei Odom. You are standing and waiting for it to dry, and you are anticipating it should dry, and therefore it's not a problem of Muksa. If you took grapes and you put them out to dry to become raisins, and they somehow became raisins a bit sooner than expected, they remain Muksa for the whole of Shabbos. So there he says there's a difference. There's a whole lomdus. So sometimes we do see that something which is anticipated, a change which is anticipated to happen on Shabbos, so some say that is considered not Muksa for the whole of Shabbos. So this he says, Re'ei ha'ora, look in the note, but it does remain a bit of a question. Could you say that because you are expecting it to go off, therefore it's not Muksa for the whole of Shabbos? Or do you say because it was out of bounds with the onset of Shabbos, it remains Muksa for the whole of Shabbos? So he leaves that as a question. So I'll also leave it as a question, but it's something, and therefore I would say don't do it.
But I just asked.
That becomes a different question.
But I just asked, what's the difference?
What about having a dishwasher running on a timer? Now, the Sefer which I have in front of you here is the Sefer Piskei Teshuvos we've quoted many times. But here's dealing with it's let's say you put it in before Shabbos and you have it set at 11 o'clock at night, it's going to go on. Is that allowed to have a machine switching on Shabbos? I must tell you that there is a very sharp shuva in Igros Moshe about using time switches. And he has a lotion. He says, had Chazal, who made the takona of the Isur Amiru Lenochri, had there been time switches in their times, they would have forbidden time switches. Only for lighting, yes, but not for anything else. All right, we use time switch for lighting and heating, but not for anything else. The background for this was, I heard, that there was someone who asked Reb Moshe, could he set his box? I was in school where Rabbi Chazan used to call it the Tumah box. Could he set, and the Dodgers are playing the Yankees on Shabbos afternoon. No, could he set a timer to switch on the Tumah box? He should be able to see, have Oinek Shabbos with the Dodgers and the Yankees. And Moshe was so upset with the question, and that was the kind of the kanoas, almost uncharacteristic of Moshe, where he talks about this in such condemning terms about using time switches. But this is a what you see here is talking about the Abshamilsa, a thing which is normally switched on as you use it, and it makes noise, that shouldn't be activated by a time switch on Shabbos, even though it was set in, the time switch was set up before Shabbos. But I have a bigger problem with this. There's a brayse which says the following: Echod mevi es hamayim, ve'echod mevi es ha'esh. So there's a stove, and I brought water and placed it on the stove, and later someone else came along and put coals or put in wood, and then the water which I brought at 9 o'clock, at 10 o'clock, someone put in fuel, and it starts cooking. So the Isur Rabbanon, for me to put the water at a place where the power, the fuel, the heat will come subsequently. So for me to put it there is Isur Rabbanon. So now I have a dishwasher, and now there's a timer which is going to go on at 3 o'clock. It's now 2 o'clock. If I don't close that door, the dishwasher will not switch on. So by me closing the door, I am enabling that at 3 o'clock, the power will activate it. So it's certainly Yosim Rabbanon. Echad mevi hamayim, ve'echad mevi ha'esh. The one who brought the mayim, where the eish will come later, is Isur Rabbanon. Certainly, if you want to follow the approach of the Chazon Ish of electricity being an union of boine, so you can certainly see here that it's not that the electricity running through the tracks is boine. It's placing the circuit, creating the circuit that the track that the electricity can travel. So by you closing the door, so you have completed the track over here. Of course, there's another switch further on, but that's the boine that you have made. You've made the track for the electricity to travel. So therefore, certainly according to that shitta, it's definitely, it could be according to him would be a deraisa. But even not so, but certainly it's echad maybe a samayim, echad maybe a so'esh, which would be yosim d'rabbanan. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Unfortunately, a couple of people in Beis Medrash by us were wearing bandages last week, and they asked about Netilas Yadayim. And so let's take a look about Netilas Yadayim when you have a bandage or a plaster, and etc. So here we have this one who has a bandage on his hand, he has a wound and a bandage. And the wound is such that he cannot remove the bandage because of the pain of the wound. So then you should wash the rest of the hand. So you don't wash the whole hand, you wash the rest of the hand where there's no wound. You can't wash half a hand. You have to wash it all in one go. So imagine if a person had a finger missing. So he washes what is available. So the same thing here is not going to use the part of the hand which is under the bandage. He's not going to be using in any case. So to touch the food. So he washes what is beyond the bandage. But then he says, this gets a little bit tricky. Omnom tzorich lizoher, you have to be careful that the water shouldn't touch the bandage, because we don't want that water to come back to the hand. So I have to explain something. There in the Mishnah in Yadayim, talks about the Mayim Rishonim and Mayim Shniyim. Chachamim made a takona, Shlomo HaMelech, to wash Netilas Yadayim, and your hands are tomei. You wash the first time, so your hands become toher, but the water is tomei. Then you have Mayim Shniyim to purify the water which is on your hands. So they got Mayim Rishonim, Mayim Shniyim. If you're wearing a bandage, so then as you pour it, so some of the Mayim Rishonim will go onto the bandage. And then you'll pour Mayim Shniyim. But then some water, Mayim Rishonim, which are Mayim Tmeim, will trickle from the bandage back onto the hand. And they will be matama your hand. So he says that's why you should be careful not to pour water onto the bandage, because it'll come back, it's going to create a problem. Difficult to avoid this. So therefore he says, pour a revius. So the assumption is, because you're using a revius of water, it's immune to tumah. Fine. So now what we've seen so far is that you'd pour a revius plus, Baruch Hashem, that's not a problem, and you pour it on the hand, and if a little bit spills onto the bandage, it doesn't matter. The problem which we have here is that in this concept, that the revius of water is immune to tumah, is a machlokus tanoim. It's machlokus Reb Meir and Reb Yossi. Reb Meir says it's immune to tumah. Reb Yossi says our revius is also eligible for tumah, prone to tumah. In Seder Netilas Yadayim, in the Siddur, the Alter Rebbe is machmir like Reb Yossi. So therefore, Chalabau Shechos says, oh, wait a minute. Here the Alter Rebbe says use a revius, but in Netilas Yadayim he says that a revius is also eligible for tumah. So I say I don't have a solution. So Reb Chaim Noah raises this question in Ksas HaShulchan, and he gives us an interesting reference. And I'm discussing this because it's in the Geya. What happens if you wake up in the morning, you want to wash Negelwasser, and you don't have enough water to wash 3 times on each hand? Alternative, whatever it may be. You don't have enough water to wash 3 times. So the Alter Rebbe says, wash once, because the main tumah is removed by the first time. You wash another 2 times, that's to complete the removal of the tumah. But the primary purification is achieved by washing once. And there the Alter Rebbe says, if you've got only a small amount of water, so then you should wash with the revius on both hands. So he's talking about the revius being immune to tumah. So there the Alter Rebbe does accept the opinion of Reb Meir that a revius is immune to tumah. So what's the answer? Of course, when we can, we'll be machmir like Reb Yossi to say that a revius is eligible for tumah. But when we're stuck, you only have a revius, the tiniest amount of water, you rely on the more lenient opinion. So then it says Reb Chaim, the same thing here, the fellow's never got a bandage on his hand. So we'll rely on their lenient opinion that the revius is immune to tumah. That's a bit of the lomdas behind this. Someone's asking to clarify. Echad mevius ha'etzim, echad mevius ha'mayim. That's on Shabbos itself, maskim. So let me find what perhaps it wasn't clear. My question here is, if on Shabbos, so we finished this point about the Netilas Yadayim, coming back to the dishwasher story. When you close the dishwasher, until then, there was no possibility for the dishwasher to switch on at 3 o'clock. When you close the dishwasher, you have done an innocent thing, but you have enabled that later a malacha will take place. That I'm comparing to someone putting in a pot of water on a cold stove, knowing that subsequently the fire will go on. So here's the same thing. You're closing the thing, closing the dishwasher. Nothing's happening now, but it will happen later. So you are enabling something to happen subsequently. And if you do that on Shabbos, that's not okay. Even though the timer was set in motion from before Shabbos, but the closing the door is actually, in a sense, a kind of makeh b'pathish to the enabling. So someone's asking, opening a dishwasher after the cycle is finished, why is it different from opening an oven after the timer has gone off? The question is a good question. And it also depends which type of oven you're talking about. Is it the fan oven? Is it, it would depend which type of oven. Is it got to do with, why couldn't you open the oven earlier? All right, so we'll have to discuss that more carefully at another time. Let's move on. Very important shayla. A woman called me up. She had gone to Tesco, or someone had gone to Tesco, and they bought. Now, it's a machlokas aposkim. Is it basil or basil? So you'll be mochel. I'm going to say basil. Fine. And she comes home and looks at it. It says it's Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael. We all know that this year's Shemitah. So now I wanted to clarify mamish negir to a lot of people, everyone, all from Eden. In case you do get some produce from Eretz Yisrael, what are you going to do now? So I'm sure many people have refreshed their knowledge of Hilchos Shemitah, but for those who are still a little bit dusty, let's remind ourselves. Shemitah is l'ochlo. Shemitah is that you're allowed to eat it. On the contrary, it's made that it should be free for everyone to eat. It's kedushas shvius. L'ochlo l'vleile hefsid. You mustn't waste it. L'ochlo l'vleile schoire. You're not allowed to make business with shvius. You shouldn't export it to Chutz La'aretz. There are restrictions, but in principle, Shemitah produce is for eating. During the times of the Mishnah, or perhaps earlier, the Chachamim, possibly earlier, the Chachamim observed the following. There's a word sfiach. Sfiach in Yiddish is translated widerwuchs. It's as if it grows by itself. This year you have tomatoes, and you cleared it away, and then next year, well, there's tomatoes again, whatever it may be. You didn't plant them; they grew by themselves. So if things grow, vegetables grow by themselves, so then it shouldn't be a problem to use them in Shemitah. However, Chachamim saw the following. They saw that some farmers had fields full of produce, of vegetables, and when they were challenged, they said, sfichin, it grew by itself. The Chachamim therefore made a very, very draconian gezerah that no sfichin of vegetables are allowed in Shemitah. Not allowed to eat them. So again, Shemitah in principle is that you should be allowed to eat. You and your family, it should be a hefker for everyone to eat. Here they made an isur on sfichin. Those who are learning Rambam 3 prokim a day, it was just yesterday's Rambam. There's this gezerah on sfichin. So what I have in front of you is the Sefer Pa'as HaShulchan, written by a Talmud Agro, Rebbe Yisrael of Shklov, the dinim of mitzvahs atluyas ba'aretz, the stuff which is irrelevant, the halachas are relevant to Eretz Yisrael, particularly, are not discussed very much in detail in the Shulchan Aruch because largely they weren't relevant for most people at the time, very bekitzer. And so Rebbe Yisrael of Shklov, 200 something years ago, he made like a hashloma to the Shulchan Aruch on these halachas. Is one of the classics for him. So you have here Yairokas Shederech Broiva Odom Lezora, the vegetables, the greens, which are it's normal to plant them, and grain and beans, etc., pulses. Whatever grows from them are also midivreim. So anything which grows from kitniyos or vegetables which grow during Shemitah are also midrabanan. And this is a penalty, kind of, in case the farmer had secretively been planting and he says it's svichen. What is the halacha about vegetables which started growing in Tofshin Pei Aleph and they are harvested in Tofshin Pei Beis? In Tofshin Pei Aleph, you're allowed to plant those vegetables. So here's the question. Do sfichim from pre-shvius, from shishis, which are now harvested in shvius, do they have the isur of sfichim? Let me explain something. The status of a fruit is like this. Pri ha'ilon, pri ha'etz, The status, whether it's a Shemitah or not a Shemitah fruit, depends on when it blossomed. The status of Yerokas depends on when they were harvested. So if you pick radishes 2 days after Rosh Hashanah, they are Shemitah radishes, masculine. But whether the Issa of Sfichin applies, according to the Rambam, it looks like he holds any vegetables, any time in Shemitah, are subject to the Issa Sfichin. Most poskim, other poskim, don't follow the Rambam, and they say that Sfichin is only when it started growing in Shemitah. But here, this is what the Pasach Shulchan is writing. Yerokes shetzomchu b'shishis. They started growing before Shemitah. Or boshlu legamri b'shishis. They were ripened already in shishis. V'loktu b'zayin, and they were now harvested in Shemitah. Motorim b'achila. But they are chayav b'kedushas shvius. There are, now you can see this a little bit of, he said they were totally ripened. Al kaponim, there is room to say that vegetables or greens which started growing in shishis and harvested in Shemitah, that they are not subject to the Isur Sfichin. They are subject to the Kedushas Shvius, but they're not also under the Isur of Sfichin. So before answering this lady who asked me this question, I looked up the various lists which you have from the various kashrus authorities, and you could see that they gave, like, till somewhere in, I think somewhere around now, perhaps in Kislev, they gave a kind of that the Isur on these greens, like basil, things like that, only begins like a month and a half or 2 months into Shemitah, and that's for this reason, because whatever was harvested earlier will have started growing before Shemitah, and therefore it's not subject to the Isur of Sfichin, or perhaps it means that the majority had grown already before. But when does it really start? The Isur Sfichin on those species starts later. So what I want to say is, of course, practically one should be vigilant and try to avoid buying these things. Why? Because it's the Isur of Schreiner. And by buying it, you are assisting the trade with Shemitah stuff, which is not allowed. Other problems, that might be true. But on the other hand, at the moment, some of these things would be permitted. Later on in the year, even if, let's say, next month, it could be that the halacha on that particular species it will not be okay to use. And what you'll have to do is just hold on to it, leave it till it decomposes, and then dispose of it then. This is all said about Beire Pri Adama. Things which are Beire Pri Ha'etz, they are largely not subject to Shemitah rules yet. Of course, the farmer is not allowed to cultivate and not allowed to prune, but the most fruit which are now available will have started growing, have blossomed last year, and therefore the Kedusha Shvius doesn't apply. But on the other hand, they will spill over well into Tov Shin Pei Gimel, will be still the applicable the dinim of Shemitah for Pri Ha'etz. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Okay. Question which we have here is, I'm just going to come back to the link if those who want to know, a link for recordings, so you have it over there. But someone asked the question, it's a shliach in a town which is not a very small Shomer Shabbos community. Probably you can count on your two hands the amount of Shomer Shabbos there. It happens to be a Shomer Shabbos. Modern Orthodox family moved in. They couldn't find anything near the shul, so the closest they found is something which is an hour's walk, and they would like to come to shul. So they want to, but an hour's walk is tircha gdoila, so they want to rollerblade. Some young people, Mr. Are they allowed to use rollerblades to come to shul? Or should the rabbi is asking me, should he object? Should he say you can't come to shul with the rollerblades? So I spent quite a while looking around this, about this. There's a concept called uvdin dechel, which is a mundane behavior. So even if there were an eruv, but we would not ride a bike. Now some people say because it might develop a puncture, you might come to pump it, repair it. But one of the reasons given is uvdin dechel. what's the definition of Uvdin Dechel? So one of the definitions given is, if this is the way people go about their daily schedule for work, for shopping, so that's the kind of thing which is called Uvdin Dechel. So in communities where bikes are used by adults, and became more and more popular here also. So then bikes are used for going to work, bikes are used for going shopping. So that's Uvdin Dechel. A children's tricycle is not an Uvdin Dechel. It's for entertainment. It's not used for going shopping. You can now it's interesting, but the scooters, I would think twice whether a scooter now is called Uvdin Dechel, because increasingly people looks like they are going at least to work with these adult scooters, but let's not go into that. But let's come back to rollerblades. Rollerblades, I think, are still not the kind of thing which people would go shopping, or it's more very much an entertainment type of piece of equipment. The sefer, which I did find discussing it, is a sefer called Be'er Sorim by the Rav of Geneva. And he looked at the rollerblades and he wanted to see whether they would create sparks when you scrape across the pavement, but it's not. It's made with plastic. It's not made with metal. And the general take is a certain kind of ambivalence. Of course, it's not so Pasik, it's not so Shabbosdik, but certainly not enough grounds to say to someone that you can't come to shul with the rollerblade. There's not enough grounds to say such a thing. And so I told the shliach, the Rav there, if this fellow is coming to rollerblades, you should not object. Of course, once he comes into shul, he would be expected to change into more conventional footwear. Fine, but coming to shul with them it's something which one should certainly be able to live with. Right. Someone's asking, what if the supermarket doesn't show the country of origin? I once asked Rav Padvers, Rabbeinu Chalav Shalom, I asked him this question about, you buy a carton of orange juice and it says produce of more than one country. Are you allowed to use it? So he relied on the principle of Kol de Parish Miruba Parish, that you can rely that it's come from the majority, from one of the majority. The majority of countries are not there. Eretz Yisrael is not the majority. And therefore, of orange juice producers, you can rely it's from Spain, it's from Morocco, whatever it may be. And similarly, if it doesn't say on the packet where it's from, then you would be permitted to rely on Roiv countries which this comes from, and you'd be allowed to use it without worry. There are certain times where you may be aware that this kind of is actually majority from Eretz Yisrael, or very high incident from Eretz Yisrael, that would change the rules. But if it's that the same thing can be from anywhere or from many countries, and Eretz Yisrael is a minority, you'll be allowed to rely on the Roiv. Let's one last question which we have. We're running late. Shimon Esra. Now the fellow who asked me has got a dilemma. His work schedule is he has to be at a certain time, and then he has a break later. Now l'chatchila one should try to daven shacharis min Shimon Esra after sunrise, but if he does wait for sunrise, it will mean he'll have to first do a first shift of work and then daven. So he's got a question: should I daven before sunrise and not do work before davening, or should I do my work shift and then daven later? So this seems to be a fairly straightforward halacha for psak. This is from the Piskei Teshuvos, but he takes a very strong position here. He says that to do work before davening is isur. To daven before nets is not it's recommended you daven after nets, but it's not an issue to daven earlier. And therefore, between the two, so he writes that you should actually daven before nets and then go to work rather than work and then daven later. Okay. I'll just finish off with something which someone asked me. Why is it that in the Siddur, at the end of Musaf on Shabbos, we have Velokachta Soiles, and then we say, there's indicated, remember to say the Sheish Chiris. Why is it not the other way around? Because we have a principle, Toda V'Sheinu Toda, Toda Kodem. So Sheish Chiris is every day, Velokachta Soiles only Shabbos. And so why is Sheish Chiris seems to be second after Velokachta Soiles? So I answered him, if you look in the wording of the Siddur, it says, Musafin, and says about that the lechem upon him is following on straight from the Korban Musaf. And therefore there's a special connection between Velokachta Soiles and Musaf. Sheish Chiris can be any time of the day, whereas the Velokachta Soiles has got a certain affiliation dafka to Musaf, and therefore, like you see it Alter Rebbe in Hilchos B'dikas Chometz, he talks about B'dikas Chometz and Maidiv. Of course, Maidiv is first every day, but Maidiv can be done the whole night, whereas B'dikas Chometz should be done just as nightfall. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe says you do B'dikas Chometz first. So without going to the Lomdas, but coming back, that Velokachta Soiles has got a special connection to Musaf, and therefore it takes precedence to the Sheish Chiris, which can be done any time of the day. Wish you all a gute Woche, and alles soll sein gesund und stark. We should meet in good health.
Amen. Gute Woche. Ja, schön.
What was that?